today. So we're talking about the game, the mind, just one, Codenames, Duet, and the crew. So what's your list for these games? What's your favorite of these? What's your least favorite? What's somewhere in between? Hello and welcome to the One Stop Co-op Shop streamed, your one stop for co-op news and playthroughs, and today, reviews as well. So welcome. Hopefully you enjoy this. Now, I noticed my stream isn't streaming exactly what I want it to, so let me do this. Let me play it. Not going to be exactly the same as how I had planned. I wanted it to be full stream, but I'll figure it out at some point. But I do like the bubbles in the background, so call it a self-indulgence. Hello, Snow. How are you tonight? Good talking to you as always. Good evening. Today, going to cover some really fun games. These are some of my favorite games. If you all have heard me in the past, some of the ones I love the most. We're talking about the game, the mind, just one, Codenames, Duet, and the crew. There it is at the bottom there. Some of my all-time favorite games. So I'm going to do a 5-and-5 format, which you're used to from our regular YouTube channel. Now we're going to start doing it on the stream channel. But we figured, what's the point of having you guys tune in just for, a 5-minute review? It doesn't make sense. So we're going to bundle them together. And today we're talking about light games. And like I said, these are some of my favorite games of all time. So I'm going to go through 5-and-5 reviews for each of these games. Please feel free. I know there's a bunch of you in the chat already. Love to have your comments on these games as well. And then at the end, I'm going to rank them for you in terms of my favorite, from my favorite to my least favorite. Light games are fun from time to time. Yes, no, I agree. Now look, this isn't going to be the thing you're going to play all the time, right? But I do think these games have their place. They're light, they're portable, they're stuff you can take with you. They're things you can introduce to non-gamers. And I think that's part of the reason I wanted to do this list first. This is for you to play with your family and friends. I know the holidays are kind of over for the year. I know it was a little bit hard to do this year because we weren't seeing people live. But just for the future, whenever you have gatherings, parties, whatever else, I think these are fun games to have on hand. Or even if you're doing like a couples night, something like that, where you and your partner are out with another couple, or just a small group of friends, whatever you want to do, these are great to pull out and introduce people to the wide world of gaming that's out there beyond Monopoly and what they're used to. And so for me, these are some of my favorite games. These are also some of the games that we love to play at the end of the night. I know the end of the night, the last couple times we've streamed, we've switched over to one of these games and started playing them when we're super exhausted. Now, some of these work better than others when you're really tired. You've probably seen that from our playthroughs as well. Like sometimes it would just get to the point where we're like, all right, we're just not in sync, not in the same page or whatever. But that's okay too. That's the point of these. It's the kind of games you don't mind winning and losing. You're just in it for the experience. And so I think all of these games will be great, but they're going to be different for different people. And so without further ado, I think I'll get into the list. But we're going to do it in this order. We're going to start with a game. And I've got my top 5-and-5 list written out over here. Please, though, make sure to interject. Let me know what you think about these games as well. So Snow said, you're in just for the fun, not the win. Agree. Yeah, that's what these games are all about. It's definitely about having fun. So without further ado, let's start having fun. So again, this is my first time doing this, so please bear with me. The format may change in the future or whatever else. Let me know. We're certainly in it for feedback as well, but without further ado, let's get into our first one, which is the game. So this is an interesting one because I have not honestly played this one that much myself. Normally when I do a review, I'm going to play the game at least 5 or 6 times. I've certainly played this 5 or 6 times, but this is the kind of game with these light games I usually like to play 20, 30, 50 times before doing a review. But I've played the Mind a lot, and we'll get into that when we get into the Mind. These are, in my mind, somewhat similar games. Welcome, Pumpkinhead76. I'm in it to win the crew. Thank you. And if you're not, it's your fault. We lost Dracoda. Oh, okay. So we've got some personal trash talking over here. That's okay, too. That's one of the fun part about light games, too. You can trash talk, and who cares? Because it's the kind of games that, you can take it as seriously or not seriously as you want. But and some people even say that the Mind isn't a game. I'm going to totally disagree there. I think all of these games are games. They're fun. They're just the kind of thing you can take and just have fun with. All right. So I'm going to try to keep each of these to 5 minutes, but certainly as much interaction as you guys want to have, I'd love to have. So the game, what are my top 5 points? Well, first of all, what is the game? In the game, you're going to start with 2 number 1 cards and 2 number 100 cards. And from the 1 cards, you have to build upward. And the cards, you're trying to get through a deck of cards number 2 through 99. So I guess you have 98 cards in that deck. And you're trying to put all of them on the table if possible. So with the number 1, you start with number 1 and you play an upward. 2, 3, 4. Obviously, if it was that easy and you could just play them in order, great. But you only have 6 cards in your hand at a time. And each person, when it's their turn, is going to have to play 2 cards, at least. They can play as many as they want, though. And so from the 1 card you're building up, from the 100 cards you're building downward, they'll obviously cross in the middle at some point, and you can go the other way. So if you have the 99 card as your last card, it's not necessarily the worst thing, because you don't have to put it on that 100 side. You can put it on the 1 side and make it to the cap for that side as well. So it's a real interesting game. You can talk, there's open communication, but let's get into the top 5 points about the game. Number 1, small rule set. There's no ambiguity in this rule set. I hadn't played it in forever. I brought it out with my kids today just to remind myself about it. The rules are so clear. There's no corner cases or anything else that I could find. I really think it's a nice rule set. It's 1 page, super easy to learn. I taught it to him in less than 2 minutes. We played it in less than 10 minutes. Really fun, easy game to get to the table, and I think this small rule set helps with that. Open communication. So this is my second point. This is opposed to the Mind. So this was the same designer as the Mind. It also has similar cards because you have numbered 1 to 100. But the difference here is that you have open communication. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about in this game, except for specific numbers. So you can talk about a lot of other things, though. There's a lot of communication that can happen at the table. It can lead to some stress for sure, but it can also lead to a lot of fun and co-op-y play as well. You don't know what the other people have in their hand. They can't tell you what cards they have. But certainly you can say, hey, can you not play on that pile? Or whatever else you want to communicate to them. So I do like that there is open communication in this one. I think it's a key feature of the game. Then my third point is you get to pick, I like the 2 piles. So there's flexibility. Actually, this is not just 2 piles. There's multiple things. As you can see on the screen here, the 2 100s, you can kind of build them however you want. The 1s, you can kind of build them however you want. So you're not stuck to 1 pile going downward and 1 pile going upward. I think that would have made the game a lot more frustrating. Haha, the game. That's actually the name of the game, which is ridiculous. But anyway, that's probably the worst thing about the game is the name. But anyway, you have the 2 piles, and then 1's going up the whole time and 1's going down the whole time. So I really enjoy that. I'm going to talk about one thing that breaks that rule, but that's one of my other points coming up. But just really like the flexibility of having those 2 different piles because it gives you more spots to fit your cards into. And the next thing I want to talk about is it can be stressful. I know my kids and I were really stressing out because if you don't have good cards, look, if your first cards are between 40 and 60, and again, you're playing down from 100 and up from 1, I mean, you may have to jump 20, 30, 40 numbers sometimes, and that can be stressful. You feel like you're letting the team down when you do that. So it can be stressful, but I mean, depends on your personality, could be in a good way or not. And my last point is one of the cool rules of the game that change it up a little bit is on the piles where you're going down, so those piles from 100 that are going down to 1, you can play a card that is 10 higher than the currently showing card. So in the example on the screen right here, you have a 52 and a 68. Well, on that 68 pile, you could actually play the 78 if it was in your hand. On that 52 pile, you could play the 62 if it was in your hand. And in fact, you could even chain this. So for example, if I had the 62 card, I could play that. And then if I had the 72 card, I could play that. So that actually lets you jump back a little bit. This is such a clever mechanism. It works the same for the 1 piles. So if you had the 88 for that 98 pile, you could drop back down to 88. So it just gives you some flexibility in play as well, and it adds the little bit of strategy that this game needs. I think without that, it would just be kind of dry and boring, but that dropping back or dropping up 10 numbers really creates a lot of the fun tension in this game. So as you can tell, I really had a lot of fun with this one. I really highly recommend it, the game. So let's see if we have some comments in the stream. With the Mind, I always thought of it as a pure guessing game. Well, we're getting to the Mind next. The game is more of a game. The Mind is like a social experiment. Sorry, Peter. Well, everybody's got their own opinions. We'll get to the Mind in a little bit. Yes, the game has communication. Yes, it's open communication on this one. The Mind says you can't communicate. Well, And then we're talking about Hanabi in here as well. Oh, you know what? Hanabi would have been a good one for this list as well. But I did not get into Hanabi today. You know, it was originally in my mind for this. But don't worry, this is not the last light games 5 and 5 we're going to do. Jerry says, is it even a game? The game, is it a game? Yes, I think it's a game. Certainly, I think there's less argument in this one than in the Mind. Pumpkin, good comment. Obviously, it's called the game. It's clearly a game. Yes, so I do like the game. It's a fun romp. I don't like it as much as the Mind. Spoiler alert, but we're going to get to that one next. So sounds like people view this one as a little bit more of a game, a little bit more gamey, a little bit more choices in here than the next one we're going into, which is the Mind. So hold on, let me get rid of that one. And let's move on to the Mind. So what is the Mind? The Mind is very similar. You have cards 1 to 100. You actually have a few more components in this one. You also have life cards, because you'll lose life as you go around. You also have throwing star cards, which will allow you to do some things in the game that I'll get into in the 5 and 5 review. But, you know, it's very similar. It's actually the same designer, same US publisher, which is Pandasaurus, do both games. And so they're very similar. The difference is here, on level 1, you're going to draw 1 card each person. And then, without any communication at all, you're going to put your hands in the middle of the table, and then whoever thinks they should play first plays their card first. And the goal is to play them from number 1 to number 100 in sequential order. Anytime you make a mistake, so if you put the 3 down and I had the 2, for example, then that would be a mistake. We would lose one of those life, and then we would put our hands back in. Continuing with the cards we have, we just put our hand in the middle of the table and start the next round. You're going to do this over. Level 1, you have 1 card. Level 2, you have 2 cards. Level 3, you have 3 cards. And there's no turn sequence here. You just play the cards in the middle of the table when you think it is your turn. So you're trying to get in mind meld with all the other people at the table. So before we get into all the comments about this, let me do my top 5 list first, and then I will get to your comments. All right, so my number 5 is the rounds are clever. I really think it's a good idea how they start at low levels, and you only start with 1 card. It makes it really easy to teach, really easy to get to the table, and then you have 2 cards the next time. It's like, oh wait, what if my cards are 98 and 99? Can I play them back to back? Yes, you can. It doesn't matter. You play them when you think it's your turn. And then you have 3 cards, 4 cards. As the rounds go on, at certain points, it gives you more life back as well. And it's like, well, why didn't I just start with more life at the beginning of the game? Well, if you're failing badly, it means that if you lost life early in the game and you lose out of the game early, then that's okay. And you fail early, and that's not a problem. But as you're succeeding, you actually get more and more life. You get more and more throwing stars. You get more things that will help you continue to succeed, but it gives you limited things for each set of rounds. So I think it's clever how they did that as they go along. My number 4 point is the rituals of the game. Like I said, you put your hand, because there's no communication with words, you're doing a lot of things with body language. So you put your hand in the middle of the table at the beginning of the game. You raise your hand if you want to use the throwing star, and the way that works, well, I'll get into that in a minute. That's another one of my points. But you raise your hand, and it creates these rituals, these team experiences, and I feel like somebody puts their hand in the middle of the table, and it's kind of, they want to reset at that point. It's like, okay, I kind of lost track of what was going on with it. Let's all put our hands in the middle of the table and start back over. And people don't have to talk about it. They just kind of know. And it creates this, this group bonding experience. It kind of sucks you into the table when you do that. So it's somewhat silly. I mean, it's so funny. If you describe this game to people, they're like, what are you talking about with these rules? There's not much there. But in my mind, there is a lot going on in the Mind. So these rituals are one of the things I really think help bring people into the game. So my number 3 point is the stars, and they're at a little bit of strategic depth. So what do? At any point, if you guys feel like you're stuck, you don't know what you want to do, you actually raise your hand. If everybody at the table raises their hand simultaneously, you throw away one of these star cards, and everyone puts their lowest card down at the table. And that kind of gives you a reset point where everybody knows where you are. Okay, I had the 56, you had the 55. It kind of saves you at some points. And I noticed for beginning players specifically, a lot of times they'll end up not using those throwing stars and they'll run out of life when they still have throwing stars. But I think it's one of the skills and one of the subtle learning things you have in the game that you get better and better at using those throwing stars. The more you use them and the better you get at it. My number 2 point is limited communication. We've talked about this a lot. You're not allowed to talk about anything in the game related to the game. A lot of teams like to play this completely silently. I actually don't, especially when I'm playing in like a couples night or something like that. I won't play it silently at all. We'll actually play while talking about something completely different, unrelated. We'll just have this kind of going in the background as just a social lubricant that goes on with our conversation. Now, at some points, it certainly gets intense and everybody's like, okay, put your hands in the middle again, because like we're starting back up again. But especially for the first couple rounds, this is certainly kind of game, oh, good timing. They got wine on the table. I really think this is the kind of game you could play in a lot of social situations, even without having to be focused on exactly what's going on. And my number 1 point is it is flexible. I know people love to play this game in many different ways. We talked about the game, how the rules were very fixed. I think it's very different with the mind. The mind, different people play it differently. Some people say no body language, no other kind of communication, no nothing, very strict, like don't do anything. Other people like me, I love doing body language. I mean, people start to know my tics after a while. Like if I have a 99 card or whatever, I'll just get up and walk away from the table. I won't even stay anymore. I think stuff like that is fun. I think the first time you do that with somebody in a group, it's fun. Or I'll put down my cards like, nope, I'm not looking at them. It's your turn. I'm not playing anything. I think those kind of body signals are fun, but some people don't like that in the game. Other people will count. And actually, specifically in the rules, it says you're not supposed to count, but people are going to have fun with the game, or the mind in this situation, however they want to do it. So I don't see a problem with that as well. People will do like a metronome, and like 1, 2, 3, 4, and like they try to see if they can count at the same pace and play their cards that way. I've heard a lot of different ways of playing. That's one of the cool parts about it. The rules are there, but it's almost like a flexible rule system where you can do what you want within it. So that's my thoughts on the mind. And again, we'll get to where it falls in the hierarchy as we go along. But this is another one I really, really enjoy. It's easy to get new players into, especially if you just take them from round 1. You don't even have to explain the rules. You just give them a card and you say, play this card when you think you should. And everybody kind of looks at each other like, what? You tell them it's cards numbered 1 to 99. I don't explain the stars at all in the first round. In the second round, I'll explain that and the lives and how that stuff works. But I just tell people, play this card when you think it's your turn. And people laugh about it. And, it's funny, but I mean, it's a good way, easy to get people into the game. Great family game. All right. People are just telling Jerry how much they enjoyed seeing him on the previous Twitch stream. Yes. Jerry, thank you for joining us. I actually almost invited him today. Steve was actually supposed to be with me at the beginning. We were going to each do 3 games and then kind of rank them at the end. But Steve's not feeling too well. He's a little bit under the weather. He was feeling better today, he said, but didn't want to bring him out, certainly, if he wasn't feeling well. So I almost called Jerry, but it was like an hour notice. I was like, forget it. I'll just do it by myself. The flexibility is what bothers me. Okay, I see that. I get it. But I don't play with flexibility. I don't count. I tell people I don't count. I tell people I do not mind body language. And so, yeah, I get where... Look, I'm one that is very much a stickler for the rules in a lot of games. And I think they should be played a certain way. And in all honesty, in my mind, there isn't that flexibility of rules. It says right in the rules you can't count. It does not say anywhere that you can't use body language. It just says you can't talk or no communication. I don't know. I don't think body language... Look, I'm not putting like the numbers 9 or 5 or whatever with my hands up. So, I don't know. I don't think it's that unclear. For me, the way we play is the way the rules were written. But I know people play this different ways, and I don't mind that. And for whatever reason, in this game, it doesn't bother me as much. Yeah, no, I get that some people like to have more specific rules than that. Like I said, I don't think the rules are unclear. In my mind, the way we play is the way that the rules are written. But I get that different people would like a fixed set of rules, and I'm typically that way as well. And it's funny because I didn't even think there was unclarity in the rules until I saw that so many people were enjoying it in different ways. And who am I to tell people how to enjoy their games? So for me, the way we play is the right way, where you can do body language, just no verbal communication. And you cannot count like a metronome in your head because it says specifically you can't do that in the rules. But who am I to tell other people that they shouldn't do that? The metronome is almost like a cheat. In fact, it is a cheat. Again, if you look at the rules, it says you're not supposed to do that. Jerry says they played at work during lunch sometimes. They ended up liking Gizmos and Splendor better. It's never bad, but never feel like scratching the gaming itch after playing. All right, I could see that. For me, it's more of a social activity, but it's certainly a game. It's certainly a gaming activity. It is something that I don't have to be too focused on. But everybody's going to have their own opinions. Always these lunchtime games at work. Body language is a form of communication technically. Maybe. It depends how clear and whatever you are with it. Again, I guess that's a little bit of a gray area, but I don't know if the designer has addressed this yet. But I'm sure if they did, that body language would be fine. Jerry says, if it's not a game, does it need rules? Well, it is a game. That's why I'd love to play the game with you, Peter. Are you talking about the game or the mind? That's the question. The game, the mind. You know what? We could play both. So I'd happily do that at the next convention. We could do it. So, any other comments on the mind? I feel like people are just trolling me with the mind at this point. They know how much I love the game. But you know what? That's okay. I don't mind people trolling me. But that is going to end our discussion of the mind for now. And then we're going to go on to Just One. What is Just One? Well, in Just One, it is more of a party game. This is the first game that really described itself as a cooperative party game. And what you're doing, it plays from 3 to 7 players. And you all have these like dry erase boards. I don't know. I'm sure they have pictures of them somewhere here. Here you go. You have these dry erase boards, and everybody has their own color, and you write one word, just one word, on the dry erase board, and you are trying to get people to guess the word that was given on the clue card. And the nice part about these dry erase boards is, I didn't talk about components, but the components in this game are great. They have a little lip here or a ledge where you can put the card in, and as you can see, it's sitting there, and then you give the other players at the table a number, and you say, okay, I want to do number 3, and they all write clues that relate to number 3. Now, the thing that differentiates this game from other games is if 2 people put the exact same word down, then the guesser does not get to see either of those words. And so it's a little bit of a situation where the more obvious you make the clue sometimes, then the more likely you are to match with somebody. And so the people aren't going to necessarily get the most obvious clues. But if everybody's thinking that way and nobody writes down the most obvious clues, then you have all these weird outer fringe clues. And sometimes you'll match up on those. So it's funny. It's a little bit of a mind game. So the mind and the game together? No, not at all. It's a little bit of a mind game though, like how you want to give your clues that time. And so it's really neat. Everybody gets a chance to be clue givers and everybody gets a chance to be guessers. You put 13 cards on the table. If they just give up and say, you know what, I have no clue what the word is, you just don't get that one card. And you're trying to get as many cards as possible. If you can get all 13, that's the best score you can get. But if they guess incorrectly, not only do you lose that card, but you lose the next card as well. So you're actually penalized for guessing incorrectly in the game. So there's some neat things here. It's not a very deep game, but another game that you can teach really quickly. But let's go through my top 5 things for Just One. All right, my number 5 is there are multiple answers per card. And we just kind of talked about that. You can see that on the picture here as well. For me, it's a pro and a con. Certainly it's a pro because you're saving components, right? You don't need 50,000 different cards all with one word on it. That wouldn't make any sense to have. But one of the negative things for me about this is it's like sometimes it takes a while for people to just pick a card. Wow, this has been translated into a lot of languages, as you can see. And so the pictures here aren't nearly as entertaining. Maybe I'll just leave it on this picture right here, as they have been for the other games. But, sometimes it's a little game in and of itself. Again, I think this is mixed. It's a pro and a con. Like, for me, I hate it when, people take 30 seconds to pick out a word. It's like, just give us a number, 1 through 5. With adults, it shouldn't be a problem, but with my kids, it became a problem sometimes. And what I think is interesting is you can see the same card multiple times, and you would think you would never give the same clue, but we tend to more often than not. So, I don't know. If I was to start again with this box, I would probably, put some piece of paper in there, some kind of divider, and say, okay, we're on number 1. And the first time we go through the box, we do all the 1s. The second time we go through the box, we go through all the 2s. The third time we go through the box, we go through all the 3s. And that way you're making sure you're not giving the same clues over and over. It seems a little anal, but it's weird because there aren't a million cards, and it does seem like we get repeats sometimes. And I think if we did it that way, we would never have that problem. So for me, it's a little bit weird. It's definitely a pro and a con. Look, this is not the only game to do this. Lots of games do it. But for me, it was a little bit of a mixed bag in this. I almost wish they had told you to do that. Go through, do all the ones. One of the nice parts, though, is especially if you're playing with younger kids, if it's a word you know they're not going to do, they say, do number 3, and you know there's no clue, you can say, okay, pick a different number. And then they could get one that'll be more likely that they'll be able to guess. And so I guess there are some pros to it as well. Certainly, it's better this way than any other way. But for me, it was a little weird that you just had to pick a number at the beginning of the game. It didn't really matter. It was a total, luck fest. It didn't even mean anything. But again, minor point, it's my number 5. So my number 4 is simultaneous writing of answers. So this leads to less downtime because everybody is writing at the same time. Everybody's thinking at the same time. Now, certainly if you get a clue right away and somebody else takes 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, then that could be a little bit of an issue. But it really isn't any downtime for anybody except for the clue guesser that turn. And even they get a little bit of anxiety, nervousness, whatever during that time. So downtime never feels too bad because you're simultaneously writing your answers. My number 3 is the components are excellent. Excellent, excellent. I said I didn't talk about components, but I did. Apparently, these dry erase boards work really well. They get the markers you could see with the erasers on the back of them. Really top-notch work with the components of this game. I really think they did a good job there. My number 2 is it plays better with more players. I think this is one of the negatives of the game. Certainly not best at 3 players. At 3 players, you only have 2 people giving you clues and you have 1 clue guesser. Now, yes, in 3 players, each person gets 2 racks, so you get to write 2 different words down. But then I find it's weird. People kind of cheat, and instead of writing 1 word, they write 2 words that go together. That, and there's not as much matching because you're writing 2 different words, so you're clearly not going to match yourself. I mean, that would be really crazy if, if that happened. But so yeah, I don't think it plays as well with 2 or with 3. I don't think it plays as well with 4. I think it plays best at 6 to 7. So this is definitely a game. The more you have, the better. Although certainly I've played it with lower player counts as well. And my number 1 is the matching, when you match 2 words together and it knocks those words out, especially because, again, they tend to be the best clues. That is so fun, and it creates these moments of people just not writing down the most obvious words. And there's a lot of double think there. There's a lot of, I know that you know that I should write the most obvious word, but maybe you end up writing it, so I'm not going to write it, so I'm going to write this other word, and you're thinking the same thing as me, and so we end up writing this tangential word that, a lot of people wouldn't think of. Like for ladder, instead of doing things like rungs or something else, you might do like Jacobs for ladder and, match on something, like that. So it's just fun. Without this, I don't think the game would be nearly as good, but the words matching, knocking them out is really what makes it the most clever for the clue givers as well as the guesser themselves, because they're thinking, well, they have all these words here. How do they relate to each other? It might not be the most obvious tie because they didn't want to put the most obvious words down. So a lot of fun. It's a great party game. I think of all the games we have today, this is the one that plays best with the biggest player count, like the most amount of players. And so, I think it's great for that. All right, so let's see. What are the comments? Okay, that looks, no. All right, Peter, Jerry says, Peter plays in French, makes it hard. It would make it very hard. I've taken, 4 years of French? But no, it's been, over 20 years since I've taken any French or used any French, and certainly haven't written it in much more than that. Word games need to be in your mother tongue. I agree with that a lot of times. And I'm not a huge fan of word games. It's funny. Steve was going to do Letter Jam today, and I haven't played that one, only because I'm not a big fan of word games. So if anybody's played that one, certainly let me know what you think about that. All right, Snow says they're, not an English language speaker. They're not bad at English, but they would hate to play something like this in not their native language. I agree. Yeah, there are a lot of different languages out there for this one, but it just shows how popular it is around the world, I think. Yes, the guesser, Snow also asks, is the guesser choosing the number? Yeah, the guesser chooses a number. I mean, again, it shouldn't be an issue, but my kids took like 5 minutes to pick the number, and maybe that's why it annoyed me. It probably wouldn't make anybody else's list of top 5 things, but for me personally, especially playing with kids, I almost feel like you guys say, okay, what's number 1? We're doing number 1 on this card. So I think that was more of a personal issue than anything else, but I did leave it at my number 5, which is the least important point about the game. Would it be better if everybody gives a clue for a word they knew? That would be interesting if everybody gave clues for different words on the card. That would definitely make it a lot harder. You have to guess as many of the words on the card as you wanted to. The problem is you have to all give clues for the same word. You're not doing more than one word per card. You're only doing one. So again, this is probably not an issue for anybody else, but for me it certainly was. Couldn't you just translate? Of course you could translate. And you could, the funny thing is, even if the clues were in one language, you could certainly write in whatever language you wanted. So if you got this card and like the word was snow, I think is the middle word on here, you could just say it in your native language. And so you wouldn't even really need to play with a game of your native tongue. Certainly you'd want to, but as long as everybody at the table could have one common language, then I think you'd be okay. I mean, you could Google the word, sure. I don't think there are any proper nouns. No, there are not. Letter Jam is one I like to play. Yeah, I'm interested in that one a little bit because I hear it's more than just a word game, but I don't know much about it. I wish Steve would have been able to make it, but we're going to have him again. We'll do light games again, I'm sure, because there are definitely some that I didn't get a chance to cover today that I'd love to get into. Pumpkinhead said they tried Letter Jam and it was fun. So word game and a deduction game. Oh, could the clue writers choose the word instead of the guesser? Yes, but then you'd always kind of pick the easiest word, I feel like. So you could do it that way. But the interesting, I mean, that's the part that's dumb, right? Like you just put a card there and all you have to do is say a number between 1 and 5. It shouldn't be that much of a challenge. And so I guess I've spent more time on this point than we probably should because it's not really a big deal for most groups. But if the guessers were picking a number, I mean, again, as a table, you could say, we're doing 3 this time and just flip up the card and it would be fine. It would be no different because the person who's picking the number has no information about what's on the other side of the card. That's why it's so stupid. Yeah, roll a die, do whatever. Like, it shouldn't be a problem, but it was for my group. But I think the bigger problem with the 5-on-1 is that you tend to, it feels like you see the same cards more often because a lot of times you'll like go, oh, didn't we do this one already? Because you're saying the same word. For whatever reason, because there's only 5, you'd think it would be, and it is, 20% chance of picking one you've already picked, but it feels like you do it more often than that. And maybe it's just because if you even do it once, it's frustrating. And so, I don't know. Like, for me, like I said, if I were to do it again, I'd say, okay, we're going through the 1s this first time through, and then when we get to the placeholder, we put it back in the back of the deck and start all over again. Now we're doing all the 2s. Now we're doing all the 3s. Now we're doing all the 4s. And that way, because there's a lot of words in there, even though it's a limited number of decks, or a limited number of cards, there's a lot of words in there, but it just feels like you see them more often than you should. Again, because maybe it is only 20%, but even if you see the same card twice, it's just annoying to see that same card again. So that's all. But yes, no. Don't take too much into my annoyance with the multiple guesses on one card. I think the more frustrating part for me is just that there's more content in there than you realize, but you do get duplicates. So that's it. But another good one, probably the best one for a large group for sure. I mean, the Mind only plays up to 4. The game's maybe up to 5. I can't remember. Codenames Duet you could play with large numbers as well, but the crew is also limited to 4. So certainly the best one if you've got more than 4. Except for if you like 6, I might say Codenames Duet, but more than 4, I definitely think it's the best one on the list for that. Snow says they have a max 2 player. Well, yeah, no, not great for that right now then. That's for sure. Although it's something you could do online, certainly as well. It'd be pretty easy to do. You all just show your words in front of your camera. I think that it would not be a problem to do it as an online version of the game as well. So, for Zoom or whatever. All right, but let's get into Codenames Duet. So, what is Codenames Duet? Well, you have a list of, whoops, that's not a good example. You have a list of 25 cards placed out in the middle of the table, and you have this little clue giving card over here typically. This looks like a homebrew version, so I don't know why I'm showing this one. But bottom line is these are not the official components. Gosh, let me see. Yeah, that's better. All right, so you have a list of 5x5 cards. You were trying to get people to guess the cards. If you look at this, you have one card that kind of gives you your clue. And in Duet, the difference is both people have this card on their side, but with different words. And so Jerry and I just played this on the stream the other day. Jerry said we kicked butt at it. We did not. We were very terrible. I do have to edit that one. It's a pretty long video. I'm going to edit out the bad stuff and just kind of put in the best of the best for that. But it's like a 3-hour video that we did on stream, so I don't want to put it up just as it was. But if you want to see it, it's still up on the Twitch channel for now. But I am going to edit it and put it on YouTube, the One Stop Co-op Shop streamed YouTube channel, in an edited form soon. But basically, you were trying to get people to guess words. And you give a clue in 2 parts. The first part of the clue that you give is what you were trying to, is your actual clue. And it's got to be a 1-word clue. So if you're trying to get them to guess green and orange, you might say colors, as an example. It's never that easy. Trust me, if it was, it wouldn't be a very fun game. So you have to come up with a 1-word clue, and then you say a number afterwards. So you might say, in that situation, you may say colors 2, because you're trying to get them to guess 2 different cards on the table. And then the other person starts guessing. Well, that's normal Codenames, is it's a team game. Both people are trying to give clues to their team. But in Duet, the way it works is you're actually trying to give clues to each other. And you don't have to go in sequence. I give a clue, you give a clue, I give a clue. If you have 4 good clues in a row, you can keep giving them clues. The interesting part, though, is the green cards aren't the same. So I have some green answers I need you to guess. You have some green answers you need me to guess. And then they also have these assassin words, which if you look here on the screen, they're the black. So there's 3 black assassin words on each side, and if the other person gets the assassin word, you lose immediately. If they guess one of these tan areas over here, then you just put something on to mark that it was an incorrect guess, but you still get to keep playing in the game, starting with the next round and giving more clues. So it's really interesting how it works. Very good I would say 2-player game, or even 4-player game, or even 6-player game. Any kind of teams you could do. I mean, even with 5 players, you could do 3-on-2. And it's not on. Again, you're trying to work together to guess what these 9 different things are. Or it may even be more than 9. Sorry. No, it's 9 per side. I think it's 9. I think it's 17 different cards are. And you have like 9 rounds to do it. So anyway, I think I've gone over way too much about the explanation of the game, but let's just go over my top 5 points. Again, starting with number 5, the least important, going to number 1, which is the most important. All right. Oh, that's just 1. Hold on. We are not doing just 1. We're done with that one. That was a really bad throw. I don't know what happened there. It didn't even stick to my hand. I just had a quirky, jerky motion. I don't know what that was all about. But anyway, let's get into Codenames Duet. Oh, let's come over here. All right. So, number 1 is expandability. This game, Codenames Duet, you can expand. I mean, it comes with a lot of content in the base game. But in addition to that, there are lots of different Codenames games. There's a pictures version of the game. There's a After Dark version of the game with like more, adult themes to it. There is Marvel, there's Disney, there's all different kinds of Codenames games, and you could use any of them to play Codenames Duet. It just gives you more clues, more cards to work with. So I think it's really neat how expandable this game is, and if you bought it today and you played it a million times, you could just go buy another expansion and play it a million more times. So there's a lot of expandability of the game, a lot of replay available there. Number 4 is the campaign. And actually, this was on a picture a little while back. Actually, I think it was the first picture we're on. The way it works is you can play this in a campaign. And throughout the campaign, there's a little map over here. But bottom line is, the first time you play, you have to get like 9, or you have to get them all correct in 9 rounds. But you can make up to 9 mistakes. And then you can make it difficult in one of several ways. The next time, maybe they give you 11 rounds to play in, but you can only make 2 mistakes. So it's basically playing the game over and over again, but each time you're increasing the difficulty, and you can go down different paths of doing that. You can make it so you only have 8 cards and 8 mistakes, or whatever. And so I like the way they found a way to increase difficulty, increase replayability within that one box, even if you're playing with the same person over and over and over. You know what? We've never beat this challenge, or we've never gone down this path. Let's do it. And look, the map, all that isn't necessary. It's just cool that they have different levels of difficulty that you can go to, always starting from that 9 mistakes and 9 rounds and working your way outward from there. So I think it's a really neat way that they do it. And it just makes the game a lot of fun. So I like the way that they added the campaign, even though it wasn't necessary. The other thing I like, and actually this picture is probably best for all of my things. I'm not going to leave it here the whole time, but they have 3 assassins in this. The base game only has 1 assassin card. It really ramps up the tension. You really have to pay attention, not only to the words you're trying to get them to guess, but you can make mistakes in the Terran area, no problem. But you cannot make mistakes that are assassin. That'll immediately end your game and make it so you lose. Those assassin words are really fun. They put a lot of extra tension on the game. So both in the base game and Duet, but I really like how you have assassins in Duet, and they're different on both sides. In fact, one of my assassins would be one of my partner's cards that I have to guess. So I have to guess one of my assassin cards at some point. So there is some overlap there, and this shows that there. So one of my assassins is their assassin, and one of my assassins is a card I have to get them to guess. And it works the same the other way. So this, it's a little confusing here, but it shows you have 3 overlap cards that are the same. You have 5 cards that are not the same, and you have 1 that matches with the assassin card. You have one of their assassins. They have one of your assassins. So it's really neat how it kind of all comes together. And those 3 assassins just really increase the tension of the game. All right, so number 2 is trying to get multiple cards at once is hard. Like sometimes it's not. Like you might have 5 superheroes on the board and you need all of them, but maybe you only need 4 and one of the superheroes is the assassin. So getting multiple, saying like superhero 5, especially if the assassin is one of them, it's really dangerous. And so I don't know, trying to come up with the perfect word to match the things is really hard, challenging, but also fun. It's what makes this game interesting. And certainly having shared language with the person you're playing with, not only like language as far as English or whatever else, but a shared like database of knowledge, like things you both enjoy together, really makes this game work better. But no, for me, it's a really fun game, a really fun party game. But let's go to my number 1, simultaneous asking and answering. And this is what makes Duet better than normal Codenames for me. Don't get me wrong, I like Codenames, and certainly I like competitive games. Even though this is one-stop co-op shop, I do like competitive games. But even like playing 2 players, I know they had a way to do that in the base game, or even cooperatively you could do in the base game where just you get 1 clue giver and you try to get it in a certain number of rounds. Certainly you could do that with the base game, but the thing that elevates this game for me is that simultaneous both asking and answering questions. Most of the time it works really well because I can think of clues and you're thinking clues at the same time. So we both have downtime simultaneously. Now, as I saw in the stream the other day, it doesn't necessarily work great for that when 2 people are sitting there staring at their words and trying to, think for themselves. It definitely makes it a lot harder and probably less interesting to watch. So that's another reason I want to edit down the video. But it does decrease the downtime for all the players playing. Now, there is a caveat to that, because if you get a clue just when you were about to give a clue, like the other person came up with a clue at the same time, then it becomes hard because you might lose train of thought on what your clue was. Or maybe your clue isn't as applicable after the round is done or whatever. And so, yeah, so that's, it's mostly a pro there, but it certainly could be a con as well. But I think 99% pro for me in that one. All right, so what are everybody else's thoughts? My thoughts are, like I said from the beginning, I think it's a great party game. I love this campaign that they added here. I think it's really smart, really clever, where you might have 10 rounds, but you can't get any wrong. So all of those 10 cards become assassin cards. And then at the end, it goes down to 8 with nothing. So again, it starts here 9 and 9. You go to 11 and 2, but then you can go to 10 and 2. I just like how, it kind of works till you get to like the hardest thing away from yourself. 6 rounds and only being able to get 4 wrong. I mean, gosh, we couldn't even do 9 and 9 when we were playing. So, but anyway, let's go see what other people have to say about it. Jerry says, of course, we kick butt at this one. Comes to see 3 hours of fail. Yes. Well, that's why I'm going to edit it down for sure. And that was on the same video as Rune Age. So if you want to see it, skip after Rune Age. I mean, the first hour was us just figuring out how to use it because the TTS mod, I mean, to be fair, it said it wasn't good and it wasn't. But it was the only one available. So we did a match of that and using my physical copy and my webcam. I put the thing up. You'll have to see. But it took us a while to figure out how to even play it. So it wasn't 3 hours of that. But yeah, I guess wait till I edit that one down if you want to go see it. Hopefully that'll be up over the next couple of days. This is a fun one. Snow said it's a fun one that can be great at 2 players. Didn't even realize that you could use cards from other Codenames games. Yeah, absolutely. Why not? They're just, words on cards. So certainly you can use any of them for this. And the nice part about the Codenames cards is they're double-sided too. So they're double the amount of words. You just flip them over at some point, and then, if you've seen one you've seen before, I think you just flip it over, and now you've got a totally different word. Let's see. Jerry says, and regardless, we'll lose. Yeah, we had a rough night. That was a rough night. We were just like, all right, one more game. Hey, it's one of those things, and a game is fun when you just continually fail at it, and you still want to play one more game over and over. Brain burner of a party game. I agree with that, Snow. It's like watching chess, and you know how many people like to watch chess. Yeah, well, I think once I edit it down, we can edit it down to some pretty fun moments in those games. So I'm going to try to do that. It's going to take me a long time to edit those, so I'm not looking forward to that. So hopefully it'll be out in the next couple of days, but who knows. 2 people stare at the board for hours without doing anything or talking. Yes, there was definitely moments of that. And Jerry said, we said we weren't good and we weren't. So I guess it was a perfect mod. Yeah. No, the mod was pretty bad. All right, YouTube chess channels are pretty popular, Jerry says. Well, I can imagine if you had like a chess clock on you that this game would be more fun and certainly more zany. So maybe that's what we'll do next time to make it more watchable as a live streaming event. Certainly the other option is to do more talking to the chat while we're going, or have 2 people playing while somebody else is talking in the background, almost like a narrator that they could talk to the audience while those 2 people are trying to think, and maybe they just have to mute their thing until it's time for them to give a clue or whatever. So anyway, no, I think it is certainly a blast to play. Really enjoy it every time, and like I said, I think it's good for any size group, really. I think this one is the best for scaling from large to small groups. So, all right, now done with that one, and we are on to our last one of the night, which is the crew, which we had another video of at the end of the night, me, Jerry, and Mike, and that is another one that we had not very much success with. We played, so you get to see Jerry, Steve, and I. If you look, there is one that is levels 1 to 15. Well, Mike, Jerry, and I were playing level 40 to 50, and that did not go well. It was bad. We started way too late in the night. We started with way too high a level for where our mental state was at that point. But yeah, so that was another fun one, was our the crew play. But anyway, let's talk about the crew. Jerry just has a lot of cursing when the crew came up. So there you go. There you have it. All right, so let's do our top 5 points for the crew, starting with our number 5, our least important, working to number 1, our most important. Number 1 for the crew is it's also expandable. Similar to what we talked about with Codenames, there is an expansion coming out. Each of the missions, there are 50 missions in the game, but they, they all do something a little bit differently, and some are much more different than others. I didn't even explain what it was before I got into my number 5 point. It's a trick-taking game. The crew is a trick-taking game. I know it's a very weird... that's a mock-up version. These are mock-ups as well. I want to get to the real version of the crew. There it is. So there's 4 different suits of cards, and if you know trick-taking, you have to play within suit if it is played, and the highest card that is played that turn wins the trick if it isn't within suit, or if you play a wild card, that wild card. Wow, there's a lot of pictures and mock-ups in here and not a lot of real versions of the game. But you have these wild cards, which are these rocket ship cards. And of course, if you play a wild card, you can only play a wild card if you don't currently have the suit to play. So this is just regular trick-taking stuff. You could play a wild card, and whoever plays the highest wild card would win the trick in that situation. But certainly, if you don't have the given suit, you don't have to play a wild card. You can play any other suit as well. You're just guaranteed not to win that trick. And there's some strategy to that as well, especially with this one, where the goal is, for example, in the first game, you're trying to take one card from this like mission deck. So whoever takes the 6 of green, like, somebody gets assigned that card at the beginning of the game, and they have to take the 6 of green at the beginning of the game. The second game might be you have to get 2 cards, but then it does things like you have to take them in a certain order. 1, 2, and 3 have to be first, second, and third tricks one. Or they have the arrow cards, like this trick has to be taken before this other trick, or Omega, it's got to be the very last trick taken. So there are different things they do, and there are different ways to communicate in this game as well. So you got these green tokens here, which you can put on your cards to give a clue to other people. And each mission is very different in how it plays out. So that is the basics of the crew. So my number 1, again, or my number 5 point was is expandable, because they are coming out with an expansion. They've been very clever with what they've done with trick taking, with very simple systems so far. And I'd love to see what they're going to do going forward as well. I don't know if they're going to go above and beyond the complexity that they already have in the base game, but they certainly get pretty complex with some of their stuff as they go forward. And this little card right here we never use when we play, but this basically reminds you that you've put a clue on the table, and that card is still on the table. Certainly we haven't used it, but if you watch the game with Jerry, Steve, and I, we should have paid attention to that being in our hand, because there were definitely some times where it's like, oh, I forgot I had that card. So they try to do some things to get over that. But anyway, let's get back to the 5 and 5 review. My number 4 point is the theme. So it's interesting because every mission, they have this space mission stuff, and they could have just left it at that, art on the cards, very abstract trick-taking game, and I think that would have been okay. But what they decided to do instead was give you this rule book, and each mission has quite a bit of theme in there. A lot of like, you're on your first mission, and this is what happens. Let me tell you, they should have left it out, because sometimes it gets confusing. They're like, one of the crew members is sick. Tell them whether you're sick, or tell the captain whether you're sick or not. And then the captain has to pick like who they're going to make the person who's actually sick. But like, it would have just been easier. It's like, pick one of the players at the table and do this. Like, sometimes the flavor text gets in the way of the rule text. So while it's neat and you could tell they had a lot of passion for putting this story together, the story's not great, and it's not necessary. It takes longer to read the story than it would to play a lot of the missions. So, I don't know. I think this was a bit of a miss for me, but they do, if you like that kind of thing, they had a lot of theme in the storybook. I just wish it was more clear, and they do bold out the rules so you can skip that theme for most of the time, but they're still using language that I don't think is the clearest, and sometimes it's still not very clear what they're saying and what the rules are for the mission. Never had a problem where we couldn't play a mission. I just think that was a misstep on my I think that was a misstep for me. All right. So my number 3 point is, I think 4 is the best player count for this game. 3 works. 3 definitely works, but I don't think it is the best player count for the game. Now, they redid the rules, so if you have the base rules, which I do, realize that they've now done it so you take out an entire suit when you play 3 players. I think that works much better, but I think it's certainly more swingy as well, and I think 4 is the perfect number. If you played a lot of trick-taking games, you know this as well. 4 is the best number for trick-taking games. Now, there is a game, Fox and the Forest Duet. We're not talking about that today. I think that one does play well with 2 players. But in this situation, I think 4 is the ideal count for this game. So for me, it plays really well at 4 and pretty well at 3. But those are the only 2 player counts I really want to play it with. My number 2 point, and we've already touched on a little bit, is that there are 50 missions. There is a lot of stuff going on in this game. And so there are a lot. I was shocked at how they use just this simple token set here in front of you, and the cards, which are just numbered 1 to 9 in 4 different suits. And I was shocked at how well it played and how well it came together and how different the missions are. So for me, they did a really good job of making missions, and I'm curious to see what the expansion adds in, because I'm curious to see how creative they get with trick-taking going forward. And my number one point, I've said it 100 times this review already, it's a trick-taking game. Some people love trick-taking, some people hate it, some people don't know what it is. But if you like trick-taking games the way I do, I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. I really think the trick-taking is the best part of it. And I haven't played a cooperative trick-taking game beside this and Fox in the Forest Duet, or it's not Duet. I forget what it's called, but Fox in the Forest 2-player game. But I think this does a great job of taking trick-taking and making it into a cooperative game. It's really clever. They've done some really good things here. So if you love trick-takers, I think you'll like it. If you haven't liked trick-takers in the past, I don't know if it's going to change your mind, but certainly I think it's the most important thing you need to know when making your mind up about the game. I would still give it a chance even if you don't like trick-taking games, because the cooperative feel to it might change your mind on it, but it also might not as well. So anyway, those are my top 5 things I think you need to know about the crew, and that's it. That's 5 different games. I want to obviously talk about what we're going to do, but the last thing I'm going to do is talk about my ordering for them and what I think about them. Now, this is going to be for me personally. Everybody's going to have their own thoughts on this and their own ways of, which ones they like better or worse. They're very different games. I don't want to, whenever we do these top comparison lists, you always think, oh my gosh, this person said this one's better than the other one, but I like this one better. Well, that's always going to be the case, because we all have different opinions and different feelings on different games. There are games that I love that I know people don't, but this is going to be my list, and it's an updated list. So, I mean, some of these games were my game of the year. If you look at it, Just One won my game of the year it came out. The Mind won my game of the year, the year it came out. The Crew was my number 2 game this year. So, how did those things compare to each other, across the different years we did the reviews? And this is my updated view of those things. So, all right. So let's see what people said. All right. So Snow says, so I hear you're good at games, Jerry. And Jerry says, it's Peter's fault. I'm awesome. It's very important to know who's at fault exactly. Yes, so I think this is back to our Codenames Duet versus, and our, the Crew plays as well. Peter says, this is a mistake as he plays a card. No. You guys can watch the video. Go back to the tape for that. All right, so this became a trash talking session in the chat here. Did anybody actually have any comments on the Crew? All right. All right. Well, so far I'm not seeing any notes about the Crew here. Snow says that does sound confusing with the missions. Yeah, I don't know. It bothers me that it was flavorful text. Again, most of the time it's fine, but there's certainly some missions where like, what? And you got to read it 2 or 3 or 4 times. And again, there's a lot of flavor text there that just didn't need to be there. I mean, I appreciate the work of the designer and what they did, but for me, it took away. It didn't add to the experience. Snow says, I think theme is nice, but overdoing it. Yep, just what we said. It's Duet. Okay, so Fox in the Forest Duet. I got confused because Codenames is also Duet, so it should have made it obvious, but then I kept thinking I was doing something wrong because of that. So thanks for pointing it out. Fox in the Forest Duet interested in me more than the Crew, but it's personal preference. I mean, certainly at 2 players, I think it's a better game. No question about it. Mike might agree with you that it's a better game. I don't know. I think... For me, I enjoyed the Crew better, but it's because I think they did more clever things with simple trick taking. For me, Fox in the Forest takes it a step beyond, because like cards have special powers and stuff, and the puzzle's always the same. You're trying to move the... Now, the puzzle's going to be different based on the cards you have, yes. But, the end goal is always the same, to move it a certain number of spaces in each direction, to land on these gems, to get rid of them. So... I did like Fox in the Forest Duet. Don't get me wrong. I liked it a lot, and I think it's better at 2 players. But for me, I think I like the Crew a little bit better. I like smaller player counts these days. Jerry says at 2, Fox in the Forest is far superior. I agree with that. I mean, The Crew is not a 2-player game. It really is niched in. That's why I made it one of my points. 4 is the best. 3 is pretty good, though. Snow says, people have opinions. How dare they? Yes. I think the Crew is okay at 3, but suffers a bit at higher mission levels. Yeah, I kind of agree with that, Jerry, but it doesn't bother me. That's the thing, I mean, about all these games, right? Like losing because of dumb luck, there are certainly times in The Crew where you're just going to lose because you had a bad draw or a bad, you might have even suits across the board. I don't want to get into technical details too much here, but there are definitely times where you're just going to get a bad draw and you're going to get unlucky, and it's going to happen. But, it's one of those things. What are you going to do? But there are other times where, things are going to come together and you're like, oh, this is hopeless, forget it. And then you play and you just have an amazing outcome. So, I don't know. For me, I don't mind those bad hands, especially with how quick the game plays. It doesn't bother me to spend 5-10 minutes playing a bad hand. And then, once you realize it's bad, you can just throw it off already and just say, forget it. And shuffle it up and play again. So it doesn't bother me that much in this game. But what I'd like to do next is I'm going to go into, and actually let me switch it back for you so you can look at the games we're talking about for today. So we're talking about The Game, The Mind, Just One, Codenames, Duet, and The Crew. So what's your list for these games? What's your favorite of these? What's your least favorite? What's somewhere in between? I am done with talking about The Crew. So, and if you just want to guess mine, go ahead. You can guess. We got a couple seconds in the chat. I'll drink some water here. And, let you guys guess what you think my top 5 will be, or what's your top 5. And while you guys are doing that, Jerry says it's more likely at 3 when you have missions with a lot of tasks, since each person has to take more of them. Yes, I agree with that. It is definitely harder at 3-player than 4-player. But, that's not a problem. It's just something you need to know. Maybe at 3-player, then you go with easier missions. Snow says, failing game stress is part of trick-taking games. There's the draw, but there's probably not that common. Yep, you're right. I don't think it's as common as people would think it would be. I do agree at higher player counts when you have to take more tricks and it becomes more specific what you have to do, it becomes harder, but I think it's fine. All right, so Jerry says, The Mind, Just One, Codenames, Crew, The Game. So Jerry likes The Crew the best, then Just One, then The Mind, then Codenames, then The Game. I wonder if Jerry's rating would have been different had we not just played Codenames the other day. Because I think Jerry's pretty frustrated by that experience. Because we definitely lost a lot. That night. It was no bueno. That is for sure. Snow says they haven't played any of them personally. All right, so my top 5. Jerry, let's see. Did you get any of mine right? Jerry says The Mind, Just One, Codenames, Crew, and The Game for me. You got most of them right, but actually, Just One fell more than you thought in this list. So my number 5 is The Game. Jerry had that right. Of all of those, it's probably the most gamey. It's the easiest to get into, probably the easiest to teach. Well, The Mind might be easier to teach, but they're both pretty easy to teach. The rules are very straightforward. I think it's a good game. Certainly, I like it more than I like a lot of games. I think all 5 of these would be, very high on the list for me. But no, that is my number 5 of those. My number 4 is Just One. Now, I know it won my Game of the Year a couple years ago, or last year. It's fallen a little bit, but again, all 5 of these games are really high up on my personal list. So, I even said when we did our review, you guys will hear that in a couple weeks when we do it on the podcast. Just One dropped for me for that year with looking back a little bit, but it didn't drop that far. It didn't drop out of my top 5 for the year. And again, these games are all pretty high for me. So yeah, my number 4 is actually Just One. My number 3 is Codenames Duet. I really like this game. I really like Codenames. I really like Duet. Yes, it can be frustrating at times. No, don't start at like midnight and try to play from there. It does not work. No, don't try to stream it when you don't know what you're doing and you've never played the mod before. No, that might not be the best way to do it, but I have fun with this game every time I play it. It's just one more, let's keep playing. Anybody can play it. It's a little more complicated to explain. It's a little more rulesy for new players, but it's not that bad. I mean, and again, it plays good at a large player scale. I think this is the game on the list that probably scales the best. From 2 players up to 8, 10 players if you wanted. You could do 2 teams of 5. It would work just fine. My number 2 is The Crew. I have really enjoyed this. We play this all the time. Almost every night we are done playing, we play a couple of missions of this. And yes, it's swingy, and yes, it's got its problems, but I love trick taking, and I think The Crew is just really clever. I can't wait to play the expansion. So for me, The Crew makes it near the top. And yep, Jerry guessed it, The Mind is my top game. I love that game. It is a game I will carry with me at every convention and play with anybody who wants to play. I mean, I just find it really fun. I understand people's frustration with the lack of clarity in rules sometimes, or, people think you're communicating too much or whatever. None of that bothers me. I don't care at all. I just have fun playing it. I don't mind, body language is communication. I am a communicator. I'm a very outgoing person. And so for me, this is just always fun. I love The Mind. Everybody I've played it with has enjoyed it. And maybe it's that. Maybe it's you have to be with somebody who really loves it to get a full experience and full enjoyment out of it. But I don't know. I just love it every time, and I have a great time playing it. So again, the game, my number 5, Just One, my number 4, Codenames Duet, my number 3, The Crew, my number 2, and The Mind, my top light game on this list. So, going to check for any more comments before we get out of here. I find it harder to do Codenames with non-gamers, says Jerry. I agree with that. My kids like the Disney Codenames, though. And again, you could do Disney Codenames and play Duet that way as well. So you just put the pictures or the words from Disney up there, and you could play Duet with the Duet cards as long as you have, those cards to use. Snow says, did you overplay it? Maybe. Well, with different versions, I think you can find something that works. And I agree with that. Codenames probably has the most universal appeal because there are so many different versions of the games. You're bound to find a version that people will mesh with. And so, I think that has a pretty big appeal for that as well. And to be honest, if you get Codenames and you get Just One, you could play Just One with the Codenames cards. There's no problem with doing that either. I mean, there's just one word on all those cards as well. So that'd be easy enough to do. When my youngest was 4, she just enthusiastically announced what the picture was, followed by 1. Bell, 1. Yes, so Disney would work. But you know what? The fact that Jerry could play it with his 4-year-old is, that makes it pretty amazing in my book. It scales very well. My kids have played all of these games with me. They like them a lot. I think their favorite would be The Crew, but they also like The Mind as well. Actually, I think my daughter's favorite's The Mind. My son's favorite's The Crew. But yeah, Snow says all of these need the right group. It's pretty much true for any party game, and I'm going to agree with that as well. So, all right. Well, thank you for joining us for our first ever 5 and 5 Live. Please leave comments in the YouTube channel when we get there, or join us on the Discord channel, and let me know what you thought of the format. All right. Thanks for joining me again, and I will see you very soon. Bye!